Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It is Monday. Hope you had a great weekend, the 17th of April. And today I do not have a guest. Zulfat Suwara will be joining me tomorrow. And you too, we're going to talk about more gun violence conversation. Will be what we're going to be focusing on. And she is, of course, the Nashville City Councilwoman I mentioned when I had my conversation on Friday with Jackie Rowe Adams. I hope you will check that out. I thought it was a really good discussion with Jackie, and I hope you'll just subscribe. Click that like, click the subscribe, because the more people who join us, the better, of course, we do. And I think that, my modest belief is that will really make a difference for all of us if we have a world where we can make a difference, where we can talk, where we can address the real problems that we're facing. So I'm excited to be with you. I made a few little changes to the video. Hope that you noticed them. Hope that it gets a little bit better as we go forward with the tech. And I just checked, I do hear myself. So that's the goal. I'll keep doing that for a while because I'm just so concerned about not being live when I think I am. You can join me, 240-363-7190, whenever it does show that I am live, indeed, as I am in this very moment. I was kind of debating what to talk about, right? What to discuss with you. Oh, and I do want you to join me, please, because I think the conversation is better when it's at least two of us. I love having speakers, but what I love even more is talking to you. I know a lot of folks now, it's no longer appointment. You just listen when you're taking a long walk or you're busy with other things, and you kind of have me in the background, maybe help you focus on some other project. But again, we are here to have a discussion. One of the big issues that I have heard over and over, and we discussed this with Arlen in his time with us when he claimed that Trump was the worst. One of the big arguments we hear from the Trump opponents, the people who have the Trump derangement syndrome, is that he's completely illegitimate. Now, I agree, he did not get a plurality of the votes. No one got a majority in 2016. Trump certainly did not get a majority. Neither did, by the way, Biden. But Trump didn't even get more votes than Clinton. So I guess that is a strong argument. He shouldn't be president. But the rules that we have, I think it's a dispositive argument. You shouldn't be president unless more than half of all Americans say you're okay. We don't have ranked choice voting. We have this fakaked electoral college system, so you can win, and many times people do, with less than 50%. It's not good, but those are the rules that we have in place. And Trump did, in fact, get a majority of the electoral votes. Look at my hair sticking up. Isn't that horrible? So that was the way it worked. And remember, I always point this out to people who, claim that Trump was illegitimate. Hillary didn't get 50% either. And if you add up Clinton plus Stein, you still get to less than if you add up the votes that Trump plus Gary Johnson got, the Libertarian candidate. So it's just very unclear if you did have ranked choice voting. If Americans had to choose either Clinton or Trump, and by the way, I'm sitting that one out. If you had to choose one, it's not clear to me Clinton would have won. Probably she would have gotten more because she was a lot closer to 50%. But even if you gave her all the Stein votes, she'd still have had to pick up some votes from Johnson as well. It's very unclear she would have won that election if it was a straight up head-to-head between her and Trump. So that's one of the real issues that is often raised, the issues that are brought up. Another is, and they're related. Another you often hear is that Russian bots threw the election to Clinton. There was all this misinformation and disinformation. This is something that the corporate media has talked a lot about. That it wasn't that Americans made a sober, realistic appraisal of the two possible presidents in 2016, and they weren't happy with either one, but on balance, in the swing states at least, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, at least in those states, enough people said Trump isn't as bad as Hillary, so we'll vote for Trump. Now, that's one, I think, very realistic way of looking at the 2016 election. That's the way I prefer to look at it. And I think there's a lot of evidence that suggests that there were, rational decision making going on in those states. That, well, Clinton's a free trader, Trump isn't. Free trade has decimated our state. Trump is less pro-military. Trump is less pro of a warmonger than Hillary. And the wars in the Middle East, the endless wars, have decimated my community. So therefore, I'm going to vote for Trump. To my way of thinking, those are very persuasive explanations, and they, in fact, tell us what happened. But the corporate media, which spent untold amounts of ink, and I say corporate, Washington Post, the suspects, New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, and on and on and on, as well as, of course, CNN, MSNBC, owned by Microsoft, and NBC, MSNBC. They spent, countless hours and gallons of ink and forests to convince us that Trump was the Antichrist and Hillary was a wonderful, great person who liked to party and was more qualified than anybody ever to be president. And when voters rejected that analysis, they had to come up with some explanation that wasn't that they're completely out of touch and that the Democratic establishment is as much on the people's side as the Republican. That was something they weren't going to let you hear or know or consider. So they came up with various possible explanations. One is that Russian bots peppered social media with anti-Hillary dishonesty, and you bought it. You were a chump. You were a sucker. You fell for it. Well, this, despite having been debunked on a number of occasions, this is one of those conspiracy theories that will not die. And by the way, some conspiracies are true and they do happen, but the idea that there was some sort of conspiracy in Russia by Putin and a bunch of guys in undershirts in their parents' basements furiously typing away on their laptops, that conspiracy and that Trump was part of it has not died. And you get this now, the latest, just stated yesterday on the front page of the Washington Post. Russians, it's an exclusive too. Look, it's exclusive. It must be true. It was in part of a trove of top secret materials. Russians boasting that just 1% of fake social profiles are caught. Leak shows. It shows it. It must be true. It's shown. So I guess all those fake social profiles that we heard recently were actually, and this is what Matt Taibbi said, most of those bots from 2016 were actually real people. It wasn't even fake. They were actually real people who were telling us that Clinton wasn't a good candidate, which he most certainly wasn't. 363-7190, 240 is the area code there, 363-7190. Hope you'll join us and give me your take on this story. So let's dive into it. Joseph Menn, what is going on here? Are all these fake stories being planted, and we don't know nothing about them? Is that correct? I mean, I've gotta, we've got to find out, I guess. So there's a scary shot. Look, it's the Kremlin. So this is part of it. Red Square in Russia, just last month. Not sure what it adds. Not sure what this adds to our story, our tale of woe, but apparently it must add something because there it is. That, scary. I guess that's all you really say. It's spooky, 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 spooky. So we're going to get into this in just a moment. I want to just a little bit more, though. I I really wish the media wouldn't do this. I just so wish they could just, try not to sensationalize. And I totally get they have an agenda. I don't deny it. They're owned by the richest. The Washington Post is owned by the richest man in the world. He's a free trader. He's a libertarian. That ideology has served him incredibly well. But my gosh, I mean, just falling for every conspiracy theory that comes down the pike, if it serves your purpose, come on. Don't we deserve a little better? Do we have to lap this stuff up? And it's interesting that we're gullible. We fall for it. We want to believe it. We just want so badly to believe that there's some shadowy negative force out there that's taking over, and it's not our mistakes. It's not that we've chosen the wrong people to be our president or our Democratic nominee. It's we're being set up. We're chumps. And not even that. No, someone else is a chump. Someone else fell for it. Not us. Some other fool. There's a fool out there. It ain't us. We want so badly to believe that. That's not how you win arguments. That's not how you persuade people. You persuade people by convincing them that a different zeitgeist, a different polity, a different system will make life better for all of us. That's how you win. Not that they're these, you can win in the short term, I guess, with conspiracy theories. In the end, I don't think these scare tactics are going to get us anywhere but even further down the toilet. So this is from the Washington Post, and I love that. Tech is not your friend. This is the tech column telling us about those Russian bots. Only 1% of the time are they even detected. Most of it, we're just falling for them. So what is Washington Post telling us? Tech is not your friend. We are. I love that. The Tech Friend newsletter published by who? The richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, who made his money from tech. And now he wants you to, he's your friend. He's tech. Tech is not your friend. We are. There's nowhere to turn, right? You can't trust anybody. It is darkness that we live in right now. So I guess as much as anyone, the Tech Friend newsletter is your friend, but tech isn't. And Amazon is your friend. Okay, whatever. Go for it, Bezos. I read the Washington Post. I'm, I guess, a hypocrite here, making fun of them, mocking this nonsense, and yet I do go to them for my information quite a bit. I guess they're better than most. So according to the latest story here, this came from that treasure trove of documents leaked in what, not Signal, what is it? What is that system? I can't remember now. Discord. So only 1% of the time. Now that claim, now they're saying it's shown. Now it's just a document says. It doesn't show it. It says it. Before on the headline it showed, so we're supposed to believe it has to be true. Now it's only one document that says, and it's now just a claim described for the first time. It drew alarm from government officials and experts. The more you read, the figure that you are citing suggests that Russia is winning, says a disinformation scholar and professor at Johns Hopkins. Well, that's pretty impressive, Johns Hopkins. But he adds, it's probably just exaggerated or misleading. Maybe we shouldn't be so scared. Maybe this was a bit of disinformation, do you think, on the Post's part? I'm kind of going with that. I'm kind of going with maybe the story isn't really all that. Maybe it's not really so credible as they want us to believe by putting it on the front page. So let's continue our deep dive into the camp. And you know why this is really important? Because the theory has been, right, that Trump is illegitimate. Trump is illegitimate because those Russian bots, because of the disinformation campaign, that's why he was elected. Not because a majority of voters in some important states calculated, or if not a majority, a plurality of voters in critical states calculated that Trump was less bad for them than Hillary. That they made a rational decision, that all the evidence that they could see, including the fact that Clinton didn't even come to visit their state, said maybe Trump won't be as bad for us as Clintonomics has been, as Clinton foreign policy has been. No, that couldn't be it. It has to be Russian bots. It has to be phony social media campaigns or racism or deplorables. So the government wanted to look into this, right? Wanted to really find out, apparently did, come up with some conclusions about how we're being set up by social media controlled by these Russian, fake Russian accounts. And they even set up a board. Now, it's interesting because how come we're not being fooled by, say, Facebook, which is actually an American company, which has tremendous influence? It's just a few bots on it. What about Fox News? That's an Australian company, but, you know, it's got American hosts. Aren't they the ones we should be worried about? Or MSNBC or CNN or the New York? No. It's just a few guys in Moscow basements that are fooling all of us. And the government was going to try to really get to the bottom of it. The Biden administration, they set up a board to coordinate U.S. government policy last year, but it was disbanded because of questions raised about its purpose. And a coordinating campaign was aimed at a person who had been selected to run it. So that was because she was incredible. And the purpose clearly did seem to be partisan, to discredit voters and discredit any kind of legitimacy to anybody who might have actually, you know, criticized the Clintons, criticized the Democratic Party, or voted for Republicans. Now, I think we should look into this. I don't say we shouldn't, but can we please have a nonpartisan board? And we even saw, I actually just said it. Hey, the people who are the experts are saying it's exaggerated. It's not true that only 1% of these bots have been detected. Even the Washington Post gets that. They admit it. They say, yeah, maybe it wasn't just 1% that have been discovered. Maybe we've got a little bit more disinformation finders outing than just 1%. Maybe it's more than 1%. But still be very afraid. Be very afraid. Because whatever that percentage is, it's going to be too high. It might only be maybe 10%. So the intelligence agencies, they caution, just like that professor, that these claims may be exaggerated. They also say that the Russian agency whose claims helped form the base says, well, these claims come from Russia. How do we know that? It was an American document that was leaked. We don't know the source of it. We don't have a date. We don't know anything about this document. We don't even know if Russians really did claim that their fake accounts escaped detection only 99% of the time. We don't know that. But whatever the number is, hey, it could be 90%. Maybe we only know about 10%, and the rest are making their way into our consciousness, and we're subconsciously buying Russian propaganda. And if that's true, which we don't know it is, we don't have any sources, we don't have anybody who's going to come forward and say this is the way it is, there's 90% success rate by the Russian bots. Nobody said that. It's complete speculation and ultimately the reporter. But if it is true, Russia's much better at it. And this is where the deep dive really does serve us well. They're much better at it now than they were back in 2016 when we all said that Russia was trying and hacking to influence the course of the U.S. presidential election. We said they were. But if you read this now, it looks like the best they can come up with is they were trying to. So as far as we know, Russia didn't even succeed at that. They didn't even succeed after all this, after all that fear mongering. We can't even conclude with any degree of confidence that Russia had any success in hacking or influencing the U.S. presidential election. That's really the ultimate takeaway from this article. An article designed to scare you into believing that Trump was illegitimate, that he's a Russian puppet. The ultimate takeaway is we got nothing. We at the Washington Post, who did everything possible to scare you about Trump, to try to cajole you into, fear-monger you into voting for Hillary, and ultimately were successful in toppling Trump. And I'm glad I didn't support him in 2020 or 2016 for that matter. I think on balance, Biden is a less bad president than Trump. But, the basis that the Washington Post was trying to convince you to vote against Trump and to impeach Trump is that he was a Russian puppet. And if you deep dive an article that clearly is on the front page for the very purpose of putting it in your mind that Russia is influencing you, is fooling you, or if not you, others, the deep dive shows they got nothing. That claim has been basically debunked. They tried, according to the Post. They didn't succeed. There's no evidence that they got it. In fact, they're far more proficient now, and we have no idea how proficient they are, than they were even back in 2016. So you shouldn't really be too worried about Russian bots, is the bottom line. And the Washington Post will even tell you that. That's what's so incredible. If you go back to the Post and you read it, you actually find, and this is why I do read the paper. This is why I do rely on that paper. Because there's actually a lot of real value to be found. So here's what they told you, and it's so ironic in light of an article just telling you should be so afraid of them that 90% of the time, maybe, they're fooling you. What's the reality of the situation? If you're worried that Russian bots are brainwashing the world, take a deep breath. Calm down. No big thing. A new book explains that people aren't nearly as gullible as the media would have you. It's so ironic. What media? What media? The media that actually is publishing the debunking. And I agree that many aren't as gullible. When you read disinformation, you probably aren't falling for it, maybe. But what about all the disinformation that you are falling for? That Russian bots are taking over the world, are brainwashing the world. That's the disinformation I'm worried about. And I don't know how to get you not to believe it. And here's why it's so dangerous if you do believe it. It's dangerous because you're accepting the narrative that the Democrats should have won in 2016, that the Democrats are the more beloved party, that their policies, especially their neoliberal ones, are what Americans want. And the only reason Hillary lost, is because of a conspiracy to fool people. That's false. That isn't the case. The policies that the Democrats have pursued for the past 30 years since Bill Clinton was president, if not before, have been extremely harmful to our nation in many, many deep and profound ways. And that is why so many have turned to Republicans. If you want a better nation, we need Either a much better Democratic Party, the Republican Party hopeless, they're not going to get better. I'm kind of there with the Democrats too. Go, you know what? Let's start looking at the Greens because that's the only answer I have. That's the only answer I have. People aren't falling for brainwashing campaigns on the right. They don't know where to turn. They're scared. They're losing their jobs. They're hungry. And that's why many are turning to the Republicans. Most aren't, many are. And they're not just white either. More and more Latinos and even a small but somewhat growing percentage of African American voters are voting Republican because they see nothing in the neoliberal, neocon Democratic world for them. All right, if you shouldn't be afraid of, well, and let's just get back just a little bit more because I was going to talk about what I think you should be afraid of. But I also want to get to just a little more evidence of how the media is trying to fool you into believing that the problem isn't with the Democratic Party. And of course, they don't want it to be the Democratic Party because then it would be them. Because they've adopted, or the Democratic Party has adopted, both the party and the media, corporate media, have adopted the same neoliberal, neocon policies. Neoliberal, small government, austerity. Government is there basically to just sort of, it's like a clockmaker. Free market works fine. We're there to help the big corporations basically make more profits. And we're there for endless war. Republicans are even worse, not saying they aren't. But that mindset has been extraordinarily profitable for a few people at the top of the media, for people in government, for the people at the top of government, and for the people who fund government. And they don't want you to think that there's a problem with the Democratic establishment, because that's for them the only counterpoint for the Republicans. So here's how the even the Manchester Guardian, which, wow, what a disappointment, formerly a pro worker newspaper from London, from Manchester actually, and London. Here's what they're telling you. Cambridge Analytica, that was back in 2018. So again, more social media. They targeted people on Facebook. They figured it out. We know how we can manipulate people on Facebook. This is from 2018, 2 years after, a little less than 2 years after Trump's elected and takes office. They're telling you this is how he won. Targeting you, suckering you, making you believe Hillary's some kind of a monster. Making you believe that she's really not on your side, that she's on the side of Goldman Sachs. That's what Cambridge Analytica did, according to the Manchester Guardian. Going back just to show you that headline one more time, you can see it a little bit better here. The document reveals how U.S. voters were targeted by thousands of different ads on social media. So again, it reveals, it shows. It's all but proven. And yet, again, any kind of a deep dive reveals the flaccidity, the falsity, the nonsense of this. And going back to, going back to that brainwash. If you believe that Russians are brainwashing the world, take a deep breath. We're not nearly as gullible or as easily swayed. And this is again from the Monkey Cage, Washington Post, Democracy Dies in Darkness, Tech is Not Your Friend, getting it exactly right. It wasn't bots. It wasn't brainwashing of voters. It was a rational decision based on the evidence at the time. Two parties, neither of which is on your side. That's why Trump won. And until we either remake the Democrats, or go with another party altogether, we are going to be in this place, in this terrible, terrible place. And how do we know that? How do we know it wasn't some kind of mind control or stupid or irrational voters? Again, back to that article. Here we go. And I love the way this is written. What implications does the research you describe have for arguments that Russian bots or Cambridge Analytica psychometrics explain how Trump won the 2016 election? And if you read the answer, there's a convergence of evidence showing people are very hard to persuade en masse. Although so many actually do believe, right, that Trump, but if you just keep printing it and publishing it over and over and over, people will believe it. The Cambridge Analytica and the Russian bots fit this pattern. A lot of panicky talk, but no evidence. No evidence. Not some evidence, scanty evidence, weak evidence. No evidence that they had any significant impact on the election. All right, so you shouldn't be scared of Russian bots. You shouldn't be scared of social media. I think you should be scared of corporate media. They seem to have a lot, especially if you, and I think you should be more scared of you being made a chump of, not others, not me. I worry about myself. I'm less worried about average voters. I am worried about Democrats. I am worried about progressives. If we are going to change, if we're going to make the change that we need to save our planet, we can't be chasing rabbits down holes. We've got to focus on the reality. The reality is our government, our nation is controlled by neoliberal, neocon elite, and if you don't like those terms, a corporatist, militarist elite, and both parties are captured. And until we change that, things aren't getting better. If you want to be scared, there's plenty to be scared of. Be scared of a hot war. And I talked about this a little bit on Friday after my conversation with Jackie Rowe Adams. Again, like, subscribe. Click the subscribe button on the right. You'll get access to all my videos. Like them because it helps me get more circulation, more people to see it. I talked about this at the end. I was afraid it didn't go over as well as I would have liked. So here's what you should be scared of. A hot war in Russia and Ukraine. Our lives being risked for, and I'm not saying I agree with all that Zapula is saying. What I'm saying is that he said there were U.S. boots on the ground in Ukraine. U.S. personnel is there not just to inspect deliveries of U.S. weapons. This was back in 2022. And this has largely been, not completely confirmed. I talked about this with my son, so I want to be as honest with you, not keep anything from you. I talked about this with my son, who's a reporter, and who's much, much, much more conservative than I am, but also is more of, I guess is neo, he's more establishment, period, than I am. He is. And here's what this article from ABC basically tells you what my son's explanation. This is April 12th. So yes, U.S. special operations are now in Ukraine. They're based in the U.S. Embassy. That's what my son said. Now, not just to oversee weapons dispersal, because we know that so many of the weapons have been lost, have been misplaced, have been mislaid, have been stolen. We don't even know where they're going. So it's not just to keep an eye on them, but they don't go out on the front lines. They're only operating out of the U.S. Embassy. That's what the ABC News reported. They had two U.S. officials who stressed that. We don't know who they are. We don't know if they're Pentagon flacks, what they are. One is current, so I would assume yes. But the former U.S. official did confirm that they are providing oversight of the U.S. equipment and supplies being sent to Ukraine. They're not just there, as my son said, because my son said the reason they're there is also to protect the embassy. That's not what the former official is saying. He's saying the team is also assisting Ukrainian military planners with operations that have resulted in hundreds, if not thousands, of Russian military casualties. It sounds to me like he's an advisor like the ones we had in, like they're advisors just like the ones we had in Vietnam. Remember the mission creep? At first they are just advisors. They're not actually in combat. This is 60 years ago, and it led to a hot war, 50,000 American casualties, an absolute disaster militarily in Southeast Asia that led to millions of deaths, and Vietnam becoming communist. This is what this reads to me. Now we're assisting them, and we're so good at it. Where we've killed or taken prisoner thousands of Russians. This is what you should be afraid of: a hot war with a nuclear power. That's the direction we're headed in. I'm scared of it. I'm scared for, not for me particularly, but for my family, my children, who are, going to be on the planet hopefully a lot longer than I am, but maybe they won't be. That those military special forces are going to grow. We're going to be sending more and more. Because remember what the latest leaks from Discord were that we just saw. We heard about how from Discord that what was it now? What was that? Apparently, although completely unsourced, that the fake bots, right? The fake bots are getting through and making chumps and suckers of us. That's completely unsourced. There's no confirmation of that. We don't even know who it comes from. But we do now know that there are military advisors on the ground. And we do know that the Pentagon fears that the war may not be going quite as rosily for Ukraine as we're hearing, and that we do need to provide more and more materiel to Ukraine. That's my fear. That's what you should be afraid of. One more thing to be afraid of: gun violence. Completely out of control. We had a horrible murder in Baltimore over the weekend. A 12-year-old boy shot dead with an AR-15. Looks like it was just a random passerby type killing. 12-year-old boy. I don't know how many dead in Alabama at some birthday party. The stand your ground law is an absolute disaster, leading to more and more deaths, and more racial tension, more violence against black people, more violence, period. Those are real dynamics, real deaths, real reasons to be very, very afraid. I wouldn't worry about Russian bots, except to the extent that you might be worried about them. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. Zulfat Suara from the Nashville City Council will be talking to us about what went down in Tennessee, about Justin James being reinstated into the Tennessee legislature, and what is being done to try to combat the deaths there from gun violence. See you tomorrow. Have a great day.